4 men walked out of the brush. They were naked. They were burned black. Their hair reached their waists. They carried nothing at all. Behind them walked 600 people. Nobody was driving them. They had come on their own. In front of them stood 20 Spanish horsemen, slavers. They were working the river for people to sell. The horsemen did not draw. They could not work out what they were looking at. Then one of the 4 spoke to them in Castilian. He was polite. He asked to be taken to whoever was in charge.
I had not seen a horse in 8 years. I had eaten the last one myself.
It was the spring of 1536. The man who spoke was called Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. 8 years before that morning, he had sailed from Spain with 600 men.
This is Tari Parodi Radio, the American station. June 1527. 5 ships, 600 men. 1 contract with the King of Spain. 600, 242, 80, 15, 4.
Those are the 5 numbers. And they are the 5 episodes of this series. This one is 600. We are going to count all the way down to 4. Nobody in this story knows that, except him at the end when he writes it.
The contract was called a capitulación. It was signed in Spain by men who had never crossed the Atlantic. It granted Panfilo de Narváez everything between the River of Palms and the Cape of Florida. Nobody had walked that coast. Nobody knew how wide it was. On the map, it was mostly white paper.
You cannot give away a thing you have not found. The document did it anyway. Beautiful handwriting, a wax seal, and the coastline nobody had ever measured.
Narváez was in his 50s, red beard, 1 eye. He had lost the other one 8 years earlier, fighting Cortez and losing. And he had been proving something ever since.
He was not a fool. He was a man who had been told all his life that boldness works, because once it had. That is a harder thing to survive than stupidity.
At Sanlúcar de Barrameda, before they sailed, a clerk read the muster roll out loud. Alonso del Castillo Maldonado of Salamanca. Andrés Dorantes de Carranza, captain. Jerónimo de Alaniz, notary. Fray Juan Suarez, commissary of the friars. Doroteo Teodoro, a Greek. Estevanico, a black man, Arabic-speaking, native of Azemur in Morocco, the property of Andrés Dorantes. And it went on and on for 600 names.
We cannot read you that roll. It does not survive. Of 600 men, his book names about 24, and every one of them is named because of how he died. So those are the ones you are going to hear. Not because they mattered most, because they are what is left.
This is the last morning all of us are on the same page.
Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, treasurer, high sheriff. Every ounce of gold taken in the Indies owed 1/5 to the crown of Spain. Silver, 1/5. Pearls, 1/5. People sold as slaves, 1/5. Somebody had to weigh it, write it down, and swear to the number. That was his office.
I carry scales. That is what I am for.
An auditor, sent to audit a place that had not been found yet.
He also held the office of high sheriff, which gave him police powers over the whole colony. There was no colony, no streets, no houses, no subjects.
He had jurisdiction over a place that did not exist, and the paperwork for it was flawless.
I have a seal, a staff of office, and a schedule of fines. The schedule lists the penalty for selling wine above the fixed price. I have brought it to Florida.
Of which I so attest. They stopped at Santo Domingo for supplies and stayed far longer than they meant to. Santo Domingo had houses, food, and paid work. When the fleet sailed, 140 men were not on it.
They were the cleverest men in the fleet. I did not know that yet.
600 was now 460.
And America was still a rumor on a piece of paper.
In November, they sent him ahead to Trinidad in Cuba with 2 ships to buy food. He went ashore with a shore party. The sky turned the wrong color.
It was a hurricane, and nobody in that fleet had a word for what a hurricane was. The rain came sideways. The sea came up the beach and did not stop coming.
He spent the night in the open, holding on to a tree with the men who were left. When it was light, the harbor was empty.
Both ships were gone. Everyone aboard them was gone.
60 men, 20 horses, 2 ships. He found one ship's boat in the trees, a mile inland from the water.
And he found the men from it in those woods over the following 2 days.
I counted them. I wrote the number down. It is the only thing I know how to do with a disaster.
Remember that habit. He will still be doing it in 8 years on the far side of a continent with 4 men left.
They wintered in Cuba because the sailing season had closed behind them. Over that winter, the men ate the stores they were supposed to sail with, and the pilot who knew the Florida coast died before the spring.
So they sailed with less food than they had left Spain with, and a pilot who was guessing.
They raised the coast of Florida in April 1528. A shallow bay on the western side, mangrove, oyster bars, flat green country behind it. Which bay it was, we do not certainly know. The harbor he describes has never been matched to a place. Most likely it was the bay we now call Tampa.
Tampa Bay. There are container cranes on it now, and a bridge, and a city of 400,000 people. That is the last time this episode mentions the present.
They went ashore and found a village. The houses were standing. The nets were still in them. The people who lived there had gone, quietly, some hours before.
Nobody in the landing party thought about that for very long. They should have.
His account says one thing about that day, that Narváez raised the ensigns and took possession of the country in the name of the king. It does not say what was read out, but we know what the law required at that moment, because the law had required it since 1513. A notary read a document out loud in Castilian in a legal register. It informed the inhabitants that the church was lord of the whole world and the King of Spain their rightful sovereign. It required them to accept this and gave them a period in which to do so. And it stated that if they refused, war would be made on them, and that every death in that war would be their own fault and not the fault of the men reading it out.
The village was empty when they read it. The people came back the following day and spoke to them, which means the document had already done its work before anybody it concerned had heard a word of it.
Of which I so attest.
A priest who watched this done in another place wrote that he did not know whether to laugh or to cry. I heard it read many times, and I never settled that question either.
Among the nets and the household things of the empty village, they found one piece of gold, a small rattle. That was all of it. That was the whole treasure of Florida.
They found people further up the shore and asked with their hands where the gold had come from. They were given a direction and a word.
Apalachee.
I could see exactly what was about to happen. So could every clerk in that party.
And the man with one eye, who had been waiting 8 years for a second chance, heard a city.
Narváez did not call a council. He called 5 men aside. The commissary, the comptroller, the assessor, a sailor named Bartolome Fernandez, and the notary, Geronimo de Alanis.
And the treasurer.
The plan was this. The land force would march inland to Apalachee. The ships would coast north and meet them at a harbor the pilots believed was up there.
And the treasurer said no, not in front of the army. In front of 5 men, which is worse, because it is the room where it could still have been stopped.
Our pilots do not agree with each other, and not one of them can tell me where on this coast we are standing. The horses are not fit, they came off the ships lame, and they have not recovered. And we have no interpreter. Not one man in this company can ask a question of anybody who lives here or understand the answer. And the ration will not go past a pound of biscuit and a pound of bacon a man.
4 objections. He led with the interpreter. Hold on to that one. In 6 years, he will meet the best listener on this continent, and the man will be somebody's property.
Alanis, the notary, objected too. He held that the ship should first be left in a settled harbor. Fray Juan Suarez, the commissary, spoke for the march, and Narváez said he would abide by the commissary's judgment.
Then Narváez said the other thing, and that part he said loudly, where everyone could hear it, that since the treasurer so feared going into the land, he was welcome to take charge of the ships instead. And then, privately, he sent people to persuade him to accept it.
He insulted me in public and asked me in private, and both times the answer was the same. I chose rather to risk my life than to put my honor in that position.
So he marched, which is how honor settles a question about supply.
And then the treasurer did the only thing a treasurer knows how to do. He asked the notary for a certificate, a record under the notary's hand that he had required the governor not to leave the ships.
And Narváez told him he had no right to require anything.
Then the governor turned to the same notary and asked for a certificate of his own, that there was no food in this country to maintain a colony and no harbor for the ships, and that he was therefore going to look for one. Dated, witnessed, filed, of which I so attest.
I am the officer of record on this expedition. Making records is the whole of my office. I asked for one, and I was told I had no standing to ask. And then I watched the same man, with the same pen, write down his.
Nothing of the objection survives, except this man saying, years later, that he made it. That is the last piece of paperwork in this story that anybody wins. And the man who won it is going to sail away and never be seen again.
On the 1st of May, 300 men and 40 horses walked inland. The ships pulled off the beach and stood away north.
Nobody in that marching column ever saw a ship again.
The ration issued to each man for the march was 2 pounds of biscuit and half a pound of bacon. That was the supply column. That was the whole of it.
2 pounds of biscuit, walking into a country they believed contained a kingdom.
For 15 days, they saw no person at all. They crossed rivers on rafts of tied branches. Horses broke their legs in the fallen timber.
Men in steel plate walking through Florida in May.
300. 298. 294.
He had started counting again. He would not stop for 8 years. The arrows came out of cover, and nobody ever saw who had fired them.
A crossbow takes about 10 seconds to load. The trees did not wait 10 seconds. And these bows were as tall as the men holding them, drawn by people who had used them since they could stand.
An arrow from one of them went through a Spanish breastplate and out the other side.
The armor is not armor here. It is weight.
In June, they reached Apalachee and took it, and it cost them to take it. Inside, there were 40 houses, corn, squash, deerskins, grinding stones, clay pots, no gold.
40 houses. That was the city. That was what 140 desertions had been spent on, and 60 drowned men, and 2 lost ships, and 1 wasted winter.
They held the town for 25 days.
And the people of Apalachee never once tried to take it back. They shot the water carriers. They shot anyone who went down to the pond They cut off anyone who left the houses, and every time the Spanish charged them, they withdrew and came back an hour later.
On the 25th day, Narváez asked where the sea was. He was told, south, 9 days, a bay.
We went to Apalachee to find the kingdom. We found 40 houses and 100 men who knew the ground. So we started walking to the sea. And we had nothing to sail on when we got there.
Episode 2, 242. 242 men on a beach with no ships, no iron, and one carpenter. And they build a fleet out of their horses.